And there does seem to be the idea that there are certain things that you can kind of deal with and others that really are pretty black and white. Could you tell us what would fall under non-negotiable for a Catholic when thinking in terms of voting for someone?
Yeah, for non-negotiables, just think of three criteria. The first is whether something is an intrinsic evil or not, malum in se, that it is evil in itself or not. And there are ways we can determine that reasonably. There are ways that we determine it through the teaching of Jesus, that the church has done very well for us. The church has done a reasonable job. So that's the first thing we want to look at. Is something an intrinsic evil? If something is not an intrinsic evil, then of course there may be negotiability in some sense to it, depending on certain circumstances or whatever the case may be. The second thing to look at is whether something is a matter of what we might call ordinary or extraordinary magisterium, that is to say a declaration by the church that of virtual infallibility or infallibility versus one that is a matter of prudential judgment. In other words, where somebody is making a judgment about the application of a principle rather than of a principle itself. So that's a second criteria we want to look at. The third criterion we want to look at is a rational criterion, and that rational criterion has to do with the hierarchy of values, if I can put it that way. So, for example, if something is a matter of what we might call the most fundamental moral principles, then that would be a highest value and very likely to be a non-negotiable. For example, the principle of non-maleficence, which is just a big way of saying the principle of avoiding unnecessary evil. So what's the highest way you can violate that principle, that you could do an unnecessary harm or evil to somebody else? Well, it's obviously to take their life. And so the highest violation of any moral principle, which would take precedence over anything else, would be the violation of killing an innocent human being. So unnecessarily killing an innocent human being. Now, of course, if you just take those three principles and you look at it, intrinsic evil, definitely killing an innocent, unnecessarily killing an innocent human being is an intrinsic evil. We can discern that rationally. It's been told to us again and again by the Catholic Church in multiple documents. You can be sure this is a bad one. It's intrinsic evil. It's a non-negotiable. The second area is this a matter of extraordinary and ordinary magisterium? Multiple times a matter of extraordinary magisterium, and therefore this is not a matter of prudential judgment where the faithful could respectfully disagree with an interpretation of the application of a principle. And thirdly, with respect to the hierarchy of rights, let's face it, abortion, that is the unnecessary killing of an innocent person. There's nothing more serious than that. For all intents and purposes, you can't compromise. You can't say some other principle would invalidate it. You can't say that another principle would compromise it. You can't say that there are other issues that you could sum up all the issues, and say, well, I've got, some reason for militating against this highest of possible rights. It's a non-negotiable. Imagine if you said, well, I really liked everything that the Nazi regime was doing because they were getting us a whole bunch of employment we didn't have before, getting the country back in order. It was virtually chaotic. They're finally getting the inflation factors under control. At long last, we have we have to put up with a little genocide here, but, if you weigh it out according to all these other issues, of course you would say, wait a minute, genocide? You can't violate that principle. It's a non-negotiable. I don't care what else the Nazis are doing for you. You got to stop that. So now we've got a new Holocaust. We've got the Holocaust of unnecessary Holocaust of innocent human beings. For what reason? For seemingly the reason of convenience that has been put euphemistically under a variety of other things like the gender rights and so forth and so on. Now, the main thing, of course, is this a non-negotiable? It's an absolute non-negotiable. Is it of the highest moral magnitude? Yes, it is of the highest moral magnitude. Is it been declared by extraordinary magisterium clearly? Yes, it's been declared by extraordinary magisterium very clearly. I mean, what in the world? I mean, there's no, you know, that is a non-negotiable of the first rung. And so I'll just, you know,
Right.
rather than be a time hog here, I'll
That's
just
right.
sum up by saying you cannot get a more non-negotiable principle than the prohibition of abortion. It's an intrinsic evil, highest moral magnitude, extraordinary magisterium. It's everything you'd ever want in a non-negotiable.